Awesome. So let's take the next 15 minutes or so and wanted to talk a little bit about the three option close because I think sometimes it is the one part where if it's done properly and it's delivered correctly, it is the perfect transition to go right into the application, right? Because now you've gotten their buy-in, you've gotten their commitment. I know that, for me, and I know you guys know this, is I use a lot of psychological language when I'm in my appointments. I believe very heavily getting people on my side of the table, or in this case, getting people on my side of the computer screen to make them feel like they're part of the process. I never like to make anybody feel like they're being sold an insurance policy. If anything, they're the ones always telling us why they need the policy. And so one of those core transitions is the three option close, is being able, right? Because we all know that at the very beginning, the number one thing that people ask is, how much does it cost? And we've talked about this in the past. If you have somebody at the very onset of the appointment, like before you even got a chance to say hello, they're like, how much does it cost? Then, right, our job is get the elephant out of the room very early on, set the tone, take control, and let them know that as we go through this conversation here this morning, you will know exactly how much it'll cost. Couple things. When you get involved in an appointment, and one of the first things they tell you is, I'm not buying anything today. I'm not buying anything. I'm not doing anything. We're not going to move forward. The odds of you getting that application are like 99.99%. Those folks are ready to, like, they're basically telling you, I know I'm here. I'm ready to buy. I know I want to do something, but my knee-jerk reaction is to throw you off your game and tell you that I'm not going to buy anything so I can play hardball with you. Okay? Just know when they say I'm not buying, you got one. And so as you transition and you begin to show them and go through, the different closes, there's two types of closes. There's the one where you're going to show them 100%, 50%, and depending upon their age, I've always done, if they're 50 and under, I'll do a 36-month mortgage protection payment. So I'll take their monthly mortgage payment and I'll times it by 36 months as that last option. If they're typically over age 55 or so, I just drop the number down to 24 months times their mortgage payment. Just the way I've done it, the way I was taught how to do it years ago. And we can refer to it as MPP or equity protector, whatever definition you want to use. And so a couple keys. Number one is, a lot of times the higher up in age, and if it's a higher mortgage amount, the more that first option is going to cost. My rule has always been, don't ever show them anything that's more than $150 for that first option. So example, right? If somebody has a $300,000 mortgage and they're over age 60 and you start getting involved in those kinds of numbers, make no mistake about it, that first option is going to be well above $200 plus. And so psychologically, sometimes people just can't get past that first option. Even though you might have cut the second option, you took a $300,000 mortgage and you showed them the second option was $150,000, which was, again, I'm just making numbers up. Let's say that next number was $125, for example. And then that third option was right around $75 or $85. For some reason, people just can't get past that first option. And all of a sudden, they just start to think to themselves, right? Because they wanted the full, right? They wanted the full thing covered. And now we blew them out of the water with a price that was not practical to them. So I'll use terminology like that. I'll say, Larry, the reason I didn't show you 300,000 because your mortgage is 300,000. The reason I showed you for example, the reason I showed you 195,000, I dropped the face amount down to bring down that premium payments. Everybody following me? So I brought that down. The reason I brought that down for you, Larry, is because I wanted to do something that was practical. Now I can cover the full mortgage, but from a practicality standpoint, I wanted to show you something that may or may not fit in your budget. And that's why I showed you 195,000 as the first option. Second option, I cut the mortgage in half. It's better to have some than none. And then here's what I did on the third option. I took that monthly mortgage payment of $1,000 and I times it by 36 months. And that's where I came up with the 36,000 in face amount. Out of these three, as a non-medical privilege, and so I'm constantly closing. As a non-medical privilege, right now you got to earn it as a non-medical privilege. Out of these three, which one would make the most sense to you and Laura? And then they pick one. Now, imagine they say none. None of those three make sense. I will then ask, what is it about these three that you didn't like? Were you looking to get closer to the full mortgage? And they go, yes. And then you go, and are you comfortable paying more than what that first option was? So get the buy-in before you show them the quote. Yes. Just go right back into your calculator, get as close as you can, and then even walk them off the ladder one more time and just go, Larry, I want you to understand, would you agree with this statement? You're going to be paying down your mortgage here over the next 20 years. You're going to be paying down the loan. So are you sure you want to spend that money every month to get that close to that when you're going to be paying it down? That, like, at this point now, they just have to tell you, Brett, I want to spend my money on a lot of insurance. And when they tell you that, it's because they want to. Because you've done everything you can to walk them down off the bridge. Okay. Who else? Maybe, hey, DeSalvo.
Yeah, could you just go back over that one part again where you said where they have to, like, you're basically making it where they get approved again. I was going to grab my tablet so I could take some notes. You said right after you gave them the three ones and then the three options, you said something about maybe getting approved again.
I had asked them, out of these three, was there any three that had made sense? And they said no, because they were really trying to get as close as they could to that $300,000, right? Even though that was going to be a pretty high premium. And so I'm trying to walk them down off the ladder, but I'm getting them to tell me, I want to buy this. Like, I'm willing to spend the money. So it's not me trying to knock them over the head.
Right on. Thank you.
Yeah. Dixon,
what was your first number? Because I guess the top one was going to be too high. How did you start it? I missed that part.
Oh, okay. So I had started at a 300. I just, for example purposes, I had started, let's say they were over age 60 and they had a $300,000 mortgage. We walk them down. So that first option, we're not showing them 300. I just made up a number and I said, let's say we showed them 195,000, because that first option cannot be more than $150 a month.
Okay, that's what I'm going to verify. Thanks.
And listen, when we're calling inventory leads and somebody says it's too expensive, and somebody says we're not interested because it just didn't make sense, that means price. That means a rookie agent from another company went in and showed them the example I just gave, and it was $250, $275 a month. They couldn't get past it and they lost the sale. So does anybody else have a different way that they like to present it? Anybody want to share what they do, Matt?
Yeah, so I addressed that early on in the appointment. So basically, after I've got them through the spiel of who I am and the field underwriter and what we're going to be doing today, I also tell them, hey, I'm probably one of the cheapest guys you've ever met. I don't like to spend money. So my job today is not necessarily to pay this loan off, but to make sure that you don't lose a roof over your head. Does that make sense? And then I go into talking about, some situations it makes sense and is needed to have the full coverage, but most cases it's not. the main thing is we're going to conserve that equity and make sure there's money accessible to you in case you get sick with a cancer, heart attack, stroke. And I just kind of go through that before I even go into breaking down what their monthly payment is, their bills. I mean, so I'm trying to address it on the front end. That way, when we get to the back end, it's usually not as big of an issue. People still throw their arms up. They still are wanting that full coverage. And then I'll go, now remember, we talked about this when we first started talking, that our goal, our objective is not to pay off this mortgage, but it is to conserve the equity in this house. You know, and if you have older folks, most of the time they have a good chunk of equity in that house. So, you know, if you can walk them back through it, I have better luck with that. I found through almost 9 years, if I can address more problems going through my presentation, there's less problems on that backside.
That was it right there. That's the key. Lisa?
No, I have a similar approach as well, because that's what I've been taught. And I tell them that maybe I shouldn't, but, and this I learned from Brandon Hall, you know, most of the time in this situation, you know, we're preserving the equity and avoiding foreclosure. So a lot of times I'm in a payment protection situation, but it's interesting because I had the exact same situation that, and I'm just digging for my Tuesday file, my exact same situation last night, you know, that Kyle had, not quite as old though, 69 and 60, had a wonderful rapport. It was 6:30 their time, 8:30 my time. We didn't get off the phone till 10 o'clock. He's got 250,000 that's coming up in 5 years. She has 125,000, but she doesn't know what it is. And I, you know, I remembered you. I started with a $50,000 term. Their mortgage balance is 289. So I started with 50, and I needed to be with GPM. I forget why, but anyway,
The
GPM,
UL,
well, they were cheaper.
here's why. The UL Alliance allows you to get a higher face amount with a base of, call it 25 or 50,000. You get to schedule that. It's cheap. It's a lot less money in premium. They get that base with a decreasing term. So it goes from 250, for example, if it's a 250,000, to 249, to 248, to 247. Once it hits 50,000, if that's the base, it caps off at 50,000. Then they have that permanent coverage forever.
Yeah. So, but I was a little over the 150 mark, but then they did ask about additional coverage. You know, we talked about, you know, what that would look like. I could not get them to move forward. They did set an appointment for Tuesday, and they asked for a follow-up appointment. I didn't. So I thought that was a positive, because usually I'm the one asking for the follow-up, and I just kind of, you know, laid low because they kept asking questions, wanted to look at some additional coverage. And I actually did quote a smart UL, because if I do a 15-year term on a 69-year-old, you know, I'm afraid in 15 years, he's not going to have coverage again. You know, he's still going to be here. It's going to run out. So I did quote a smart UL with Foresters. So hopefully I handled it right, but I guess
Curious.
had I handled it right, I would have gotten the deal.
Well, you know, like how Kyle had last night, sometimes the older folks, they're just like, they just need a little bit more of a nudge, right? And then sometimes they even just need to process it. And look, you know, most people are not decisive decision makers. That's our job, to persuade them to make a decision, to persuade them to be decisive. But let me ask you, do you present, because this is how I done it. I present a smart UL, or I present the Mutual of Omaha, the IUL Express. Either one of those programs can be masked as an ROP. The UL, the smart UL, has 4.3 fixed interest. And I think the IUL Express, which has hardly any medical questions on it, by the way, is a little over 5%. So over the course of 20 years, right, they're at least, you know, number one, they're not going to outlive it. And number two, they turn age 90 and they're like, why am I still paying this? They can cash out, right? Cash out and end the policy.
Right. I'll have to look at that. I've not done anything with Moo. I am licensed with Moo, but usually when I'm doing UL, the Smart UL is my go-to. But
Yep.
I often quote a little bit of both, because I just think sometimes that makes more sense. So we'll see.
How about you, Kyle? Do you do anything slightly different, or do you have any different 3-option closes that you use?
Yeah, I do. I do things a little different. Not gonna lie.
Okay,
But, that's just I figured out what works for me.
sure.
But one thing that I figured out very quickly was when you're going to the close, like right before the numbers, I'm always like repeating everything that I just said. What the process is, and then I figure out why they want it. I make sure that they tell me this does make sense to do. Period. Regardless of price, because price is irrelevant. If there's no value, price is irrelevant. If there's value, we just got to find something that fits with their budget and takes care of that need. So the purpose of our call is to find something that fits the budget and takes care of that need, so I can get you approved. So all I ask for is your honesty, obviously, because I can't read your mind. But what I found is you want to make sure that you know what you're going to quote them as far as time frame and term versus permanent coverage, because they start asking you questions about the difference between the two, and they're not going to make a decision because it's too much information. So if their loans for, that couple I had yesterday, it was a 30-year mortgage, 75 years old. Obviously, we're not going to do a 30-year term policy on them, but because of the equity protector, I could do a 10-year term, and that's what he wanted. He wasn't worried about keeping it after. I asked him that beforehand. So I didn't show him anything that was permanent. That's not what he wanted. And so just making sure that time frame, like are we looking at, does it make sense to do a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year term, or permanent coverage? Figure that out by asking questions. And then stick with that. Don't change between, a 20-year, well, we can drop it down to a 15-year, and then for the same amount of coverage, and then that's out of budget, and now you're going back to the 20-year for less coverage, and you're just confusing them. So that was one thing that I figured out real quick. If I give them too many options, they're too much variance as far as that. I don't know if any of this makes sense or not. I'm kind of rambling, sorry. But if that makes sense, don't confuse them with more options on top of the price.
Yeah, no, you brought up a lot of great points. And, one of the points is, right, confusion. Let's not confuse anybody that we're talking to. Let's keep it super simple for them so that they understand it, right? You keep it clean. I think that the second thing that you mentioned, which was something that we always talk about, is, and I teach this with all the new guys and gals that I'm working with, is just have a conversation with people. Like think of it like this. Treat a lead. I don't care if it's an inventory or an A lead. I don't care if it's an internet lead. You need to treat that lead the same way you would your mother or your father or your sibling or your spouse. Just talk through it. I realized very early on that if I just had a normal conversation and just talked to people and figured out what they're looking to accomplish, I would accomplish what I'm there to accomplish, and they get to accomplish what they want to accomplish, which is solving their problem. So don't overcomplicate it, but you have to be, and I know it sounds weird, it's like, just be normal. Just have a normal conversation with people. Forget about, life insurance is never sold. It is not like a car, right? It's not. It's something people will buy and purchase from you when the connection is made by just having a normal conversation and talking people through what it is that they're looking to do. One of the last things that we did not talk about, and maybe how about Lamar, because you've worked with a lot of senior type clients. Talk a little bit about the mortgage protection payment program close, right? So what that means, guys, for some of the newer guys, Larry, and some of the newer guys, maybe Annette, is Denny. That's somebody who doesn't qualify for living benefits, prescription or medical history, but they'll qualify for a whole life plan. And so can you maybe, Lamar, just talk a little bit about what's your approach on doing that for someone who doesn't qualify for the living benefits? How do you get them to understand that and make a decision?
My approach on that there is just getting them to understand. Basically from there, I actually am talking to, if I'm on with the husband and wife, I'm there talking to the individual that is going to be left behind. I'll talk about time, and time is what it's all about to people that are older. And if they have an understanding that we don't need to, if someone passes away and then they go and have to worry about selling their home, the next day, so it doesn't go into foreclosure or it doesn't go into, getting those pink or blue or whatever color they are, stickers on their door. I'll talk about time. What amount of time makes sense for you that you can make a decision whether or not you're going to keep the house, you can afford to keep the house, or you're going to sell. And then that's when I come up with options. Sometimes it's the 3-option close. It's like a year. There again, you're getting down to their mortgage payment. Is it $1,000 a month? Is it $800 a month? What is that amount? And that 3-option close could be a 6 months option, a 1-year option, and an 18-month option. Not very different than the mortgage protection where you're looking at doing something for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It's just a shorter time frame, but gives them the comfort level knowing that they have some time to make a decision, and they can take the time they need to grieve about their spouse, and not worrying about having a roof over their head. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but that's typically my approach, Brett. It's nothing fancy.
Yeah. And no, it doesn't have to. Listen, the last thing we want to do is be fancy, right? Especially dealing with some of the seniors. And, to them, this is a major decision, that they're doing. I think here's a question that you can always ask is, how quickly have you noticed that the homes in your neighborhood sell? Get them to think about that. That's number one. Number two, make sure when you're presenting the 3-option close to an MPP client, you're not talking to the insured. Make sure you're talking to the spouse or you're talking to the beneficiary. Let's say the beneficiary is their children and their children are not in the appointment with them. Get the first name of the child or the children and make sure you start repeating their name over and over again while you're talking to them about it. So if I'm talking to Kyle and his son and daughter, his son is Carl and his daughter's Robin, then I'm going to basically say, Kyle, how long do you think it would take for Robin and Carl to be able to sell the house? How quickly do homes, have you noticed, right, Kyle, you've been living here for the last 40 years. How long does it take historically for homes to sell around here? And then, right, and then make sure you say their name, right? Because you need Kyle, the insured, to start thinking about Robin and, right? You want them, so keep saying their name over and over again if the beneficiary is not in the appointment. Did everybody catch that? It's a crucial part of it. These are just little techniques that'll help you close more deals. Matt.
Yeah, I think one thing we also ought to discuss is the expectation of that follow-up. When I set my follow-up, I let them know with my verbiage that it's not calling back to discuss more things. It's calling back, we'll go ahead and get things taken care of on Tuesday at 4:00.
There you go.
I think
That's
that's a
all.
big mistake that I know I made in the early years was I would set up follow-up for me to just be like, oh, okay, so now what did you guys decide? What questions do you have? No, I'm calling you back. So we go ahead and get this thing knocked out. Which one did you decide to move forward with? So when I call you back, just make sure you got all your information in front of you, so we're ready to roll for it.
See, there's the bullseye. Because that's how you're gonna distinguish between a tire kicker and somebody who's a ready to purchase consumer.
Mhm.
So then your expectation level doesn't have to ride the roller coaster. Set the
Yeah,
tone.
I
Be
agree
in
with
control.
Lou, the 48-hour on that time, max time too. That's
Yeah.
very
Oh, yeah.
important. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 48 hours. Max.